Yeah, thanks for having me.
My introductory statement is hello.
Well, I don't think there is a focus next right now. I think it's just focus on delivering the pieces that we talk about. I think from the very early stages, right, like we talked about how the promise, one of the original promises of Web3 in general was interoperability. And so, pushing towards that, what that means is like an ecosystem with more than one game where assets can be used across those games, right? And so I think, how we selected TCG and then Colony and then Sanctuary, we can kind of put Wayfinder on the side because that's an AI tool. It's very different than the parallel ecosystem, the game system. The TCG was just like something we were really into, right? We thought like that's a really great base way to create cards, and like it was palatable, from a development standpoint in the early days. And that could produce 3D assets, and the 3D assets could create some variation of game. And originally, we explored a lot of different kind of variants of games. We were kind of leaning early on to like ARPG, kind of like think like sci-fi Diablo or StarCraft kind of thing. But we really quickly realized like the dominant player in a category usually creates the category. And so how do we create a category? A lot of, in the early days of the Google Simulacra paper and LLMs kind of popping up, it was really clear that there's an opportunity there to create something new. And we wanted to own that new category. And so we decided to go down that road. And it aligns with a number of different kind of variables. Like if you look at, the number of people that watch other people play video games on Twitch and YouTube and other networks, it's a very large number. So how do we create an interesting game that other people can watch someone play? Or and I think, how do we include AI and the newest kind of edge technologies in it? Just like we included blockchain in card games, how do we include AI and blockchain into Colony? And so that one was a bit of a happy accident, I think. Also, in that, like Adrian from our team, was really cracked at the time before everyone called them AI engineers or AI researchers. Adrian was a really cracked kind of data scientist, and he had a lot of experience and came to us and said like, hey, this is going to change everything. We need to participate here. We just listened. And so I think that's how kind of Colony came about in the TCG. The TCG was just like, we all collected cards. We still love card games, just like really natural and organic. We wanted to start somewhere that was approachable. The irony is,
if you don't mind me,
yeah, go ahead.
Immediately jumping in, because I feel like we just asked you such a big question. It's like, okay, now you're going to summarize the whole thing. I don't want you to even have to. I think you just gave a decent summary. I want to ask you a follow-up. What are you focused on? So the organization has to keep all these things running. And I think your answer largely, what I'm hearing is basically there's no next big project. There's not like number 5 after these first 4 is not coming anytime soon. You're locked in on these. That's a good answer to hear, in my opinion. My question is, What are you focused on? What is your, like, I asked Gabby this a little bit when I interviewed him recently from YVG. He has so many teams, so many things. How does he manage his day? Without getting into too much like self-help productivity stuff, not really on that side, but just like what out of these projects, maybe like do some of them take more time than others for you personally? Like, where is your focus? I'm personally curious on that.
Yeah, sure. So I think like I'm better. I think the questions are maybe best framed as like, what do you really, where do I excel, and like where can I add the most value in the studio? And it's usually the 0 to 1 moments. So like there's nothing there, and then there's something there. And so, like there's a huge number of really talented people who know much more about card construction, much more about TCG UI and UX, much more about mobile development. And so I lean on a lot of them to handle a lot of the load on the TCG side. And I focus on most of my time now on Colony and Wayfinder. And the reality is because it's really twofold there. One is, like Koji's very capable with his team of handling the TCG. And if they need me for something, I'm available. I probably spend maybe 10% of my time there, 15. But like, I'm not going to add a massive amount of value to the studio, to the token ecosystem, to whatever else, spending my time there. And so, Colony is still, again, a very new idea. No one's ever built a game like this. So it's a 0 to 1 kind of activity where you're going to have a lot of gray, and you need someone to lead that through that gray to get a product at the other side that's compelling. And that's where I'm probably best suited to add value. And on the Wayfinder side, there's a huge amount of work there around creating an autonomous agent to be able to arbitrarily access and navigate and transact across multiple networks and be able to interact with tokens, be able to interact now as a result of some of the stuff that happened with Robinhood, to be able to interact with publicly traded security stocks. And so there's stuff there as well where there is no clear example to look at to say, hey, that's how you make a really good X, or AI simulation game, or AI tool that can interact with blockchain networks. It doesn't exist. And so, and then on the third-person shooter side, on Sanctuary, we have folks who are top kind of 3 or 4 in the world on third-person shooters who know a ton about Tarkov and games that maybe I'm not as familiar with, extraction shooters, and how to categorize them, how to fit in a kind of in between the existing incumbents in a way that they think is really compelling. People who know how to create the third-person shooter maps, people who know how to do all these different things. And so I can't add as much value on those 2 projects as I used to. When it was like, hey, we need to go from nothing to something, I was very, very engaged. Now it's like maybe 20-25% of my time is spent on those 2 projects, and the remainder is focused on making, clearly defining what it looks like to go to market with an AI simulation game and with an AI tool that is able to transact across networks. I'd say that's, and there's always also like another 10% of time that's just like watching the waves, right? Like a lot of this is, you talk to any good entrepreneur, they'll give you like a surfing analogy. Is, it's a game of watching waves and understanding what's changing in the landscape and preparing the studio to be able to catch those waves if they're meaningful for you. So there's always an eye on the horizon, but the vast majority of calories right now is focused on just making great products. And not every product needs me, and I think that's maybe a misconception. Is that every product has to have me deep in the weeds pulling wires? I really don't think you want me designing cards.
Yeah, like Steve Jobs needed Joni Ives to do all that design stuff. He couldn't just figure it out himself. Like it's
what's the point of hiring good people if you're not going to like rely on them and depend on them and work with them, right? Like let them lead. I don't see the point in having great people if you're going to just try to do it all yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So moving on to the next question. Kalos, you have earned strong investor confidence by raising over 85 million, and expectations are understandably high. How are you translating that backing into a long-range roadmap that keeps each part of the Parallel ecosystem sustainable?
And maybe with
I'm
that,
not sure I understand. Well, yeah, go ahead.
I can like maybe reframe a little bit. So here's I'm just going to break the fourth wall on that. They use AI to help word these questions, and they make them sound too fancy. So it's like, I'm just going to, let me translate this one a little bit. You raised 85 million. There's huge expectations. What can you, here's the question I would ask. You've given a lot of roadmaps so far. Do you think roadmaps are even useful? Like, how much should be laid out in advance, exactly this, exactly that? Because there's something we talked about briefly before starting the call, which is the nature of communications, where if you don't communicate enough, people have too many questions, they don't know what's going on. But if you over communicate and attempt to communicate so much stuff, sometimes you end up with more broken promises, or people think you said it would be ready on this day and it wasn't ready for 3 months. And it's like, well, I could have not said anything, but I was trying. So I guess like with the amount of money raised and how high the expectations are, do you feel like these detailed roadmaps are helpful? Or like, what do you think is the right amount of communication in terms of how much do you need to kind of guarantee and explain up front? And how much should you just be like, trust us, bros?
Yeah, and I just want to add something else. Like, how does this tie it up each part of the Parallel ecosystem and make it sustainable?
Sorry, can you repeat that last part? I didn't understand.
So how does this play out into the making the Parallel ecosystem sustainable?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, so there's really okay. So I think let's address. There's like multiple questions here. Let's address them like piece by piece. I think like we want to always like point at things and say like, hey, that timeline didn't stick, and like, but we want to ignore the subtext of like, hey, these are subject to change. And I think like that's typically on there. It's always in the best interest of kind of our optimistic view of when we think we're going to be able to ship something. And like, I think that should be the general understanding is like, okay, we're and this isn't like just like an arbitrary thing. Like, it's not like me sitting there creating some document that's like, these are the teams looking at it saying, hey, we think we can hit this date. But like, on a regular basis, you're kind of assessing and reallocating things to whatever is the priority. And you have unexpected variables that come up. If anyone who's built anything, of any degree of complexity would understand this. And so it's kind of like this, like, you can't have both, right? You can't have communication and it always 100% of the time be perfectly accurate. Like, you can't have both. It just doesn't work. So I would rather take flames for having been optimistic about something and it not happening on time, but still happening. And so I think generally that's how I approach it.
Here's my hardball follow-up, just a little one.
Sure. Go for it.
This is a bit of a devil's advocate framing, but like, if I'll just say it in like the kind of direct way, if your predictions are consistently too optimistic, at what point do you need to take responsibility and start having less optimistic communications? I guess that would be the devil's advocate.
Sure. I think it's a slippery slope. I think it's a slippery slope that turns into no communication. And I'd rather, it's one of these things where like, you read the whole post every time there's one of those there. It always says, hey, this is subject to change and variables, blah, blah, blah. Like that, there's a reason that it says that. And like, would you rather have a black box that, you can't understand and be pleasantly surprised? Probably. That's like typically what most humans by nature like. They like pleasant surprises, but we're trying something different, right? You've seen a lot of the process and how things how the kitchen works along the way for Parallel. And I don't really think that changing that is kind of, necessary. I don't think that may serve the minority. I don't think it serves the majority. I don't think so. So like, generally, and so let's get to the next part of the question. If you feel that I've sufficiently answered that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Okay. The next part of the question is like, how do you get to a sustainable place as a business? Essentially, is the question. Is that accurate?
Well, how do you make every part of the Parallel ecosystem sustainable? But yeah, also business-wise. Like, you mean like, in which capacity do you mean? I think you need to be clear. Like, are you talking
financially,
about,
I think, in this case.
Okay, sure, financially. So I think like really there's kind of a couple different venues here. A lot of stuff is predicated on distribution, and distribution is is really this kind of the cousin to scale. So really, like, you have the scale of either the player base of the TCG, of Colony, of Sanctuary, and the combination of that collective different variations of games. As well as the scale and i.e. volume throughput on Wayfinder, which has a transaction fee. And so I think like really, what it comes down to is distribution, and distribution means mobile. Like, I think one of the harps I've heard is like, hey, what about Mac? And how come, you went and focused on mobile? It's because distribution, right? Distribution is much greater for playing games on iOS and Android devices as well. And so I think, really what it comes down to is being smart about kind of finding ways to grow your player base across the three games, as well as increasing volumes throughput on Wayfinder. And as a result of those things, you have a successful business, or you don't. Yeah. And so, but I think that some of that stuff takes time, and I think one of the good things about card games is they're quite resilient. If you look at the market, it's not like a game that people play for 2 weeks and then move on. It's a game that people enjoy for years. And so I think we picked that category intentionally, and we're going to continue to invest in that category. But I think the answer really is mobile and distribution and scale, right? Without those things, nothing really works. Unless you're selling, I don't know, Bugattis for $10 million or something. It doesn't work.
I have a comment and then a follow-up. Comment is, anyone who says Mac is important is gaslighting. Ban them from the Discord. Never listen to them again. Number 2, Mac players, I don't care. You can cry to me. That's me, not Kalos. It's me talking. Kalos would never say that. That's pure flux.
Well, you can use your iPad. You can use your iPhone, right? Like, yeah. everyone has like 2 or 3 devices that are in their pockets and hands, and they're on them all the time. That's much more valuable than a device that sits on a desk.
Yeah, and then that's very true. Even though I just have fun razzing the Mac people because it's funny to me. The real follow up is, I think this is actually an interesting one. I haven't heard anyone ask this. How important is it for all of these projects to succeed, or is it possible? Like, is it okay if 1 of the 4, 2 of the 4 fails? Do you feel like they all succeed together, or do you feel like there's a scenario where like half of them do well, half of them like? How do you think about that aspect of it?
Yeah, I think like I don't think it's necessary to think about it as like a non-zero sum game. Like one has to win and all have to win or none can win. Like I don't think that's the accurate way to look at things. Um, if you had like Colony, let's say, or whatever, scale faster for whatever reason than TCG, then why would you not use that, to continue to invest in all the games? Like that would be my approach. Um, you know, it's almost like having different children, right? Like don't expect them to perform the same and be the same. They're going to do different things. Um, and so, like what's the appetite and interest for card games right now versus for AI simulation games? We're going to find out. And if one of them, has much greater demand, then that's great because it means it subsidizes the other one's time to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But I think really it's all in service of one IP, right? Like, that's the ultimate goal. Yeah, so I don't think it's really a matter of like one has to win and perform better, and therefore you put all resources. I wouldn't stop working on any of them.
That's a good point. Is like, even if a game fails, it could still, in the process of attempting to do what it does, it could still feed into the IP. People who like that project might be disappointed if like, okay, the fighting game didn't end up working out, but I'm going to go play the card game now because I really enjoyed playing Ingrid, and I got to go play Uni. Like those kinds of things. It seems like, and then Quinto, right after this, you can do the next question, but it feels like you need to do 2 things in content, and it sounds like it relates to what you're doing, which is like do the things that will work, and then do the things that you can't figure out, you can't predict. Because some things you just don't know till you try. It's much more expensive to try building a game than to post a short. So of course there's different levels of risk and reward, but in general, there's some things you just can't know till you try, and sometimes the sooner you try, the sooner you get that data. Quinto, what's our next question?
Yeah, just a follow-up question there for the last question regarding Parallel Studios' general strategy. So how do you strategize about major market shifts and how that affects the user experience? For example, price of token rising or falling and the way players feel.
Yeah, I can't control those variables, right? Like I don't control the market. I don't control what ETH does. I don't control what Bitcoin does. I don't control what Prime does, nor Prompt. I don't even work at the foundations for those kind of pieces. And so I just look at it as like, one, I try to hear everyone's comments, the constructive ones. I obviously place the most weight on. And there's people who are much more in tune with it, and I listen to what they have to say. And if there's something we can do that doesn't change what our build path is, then I'm happy to accommodate it. But like you can't be concerned with not micro. Like you can't be concerned with today if you're trying to get to a new place tomorrow. And I just think like over indexing on immediate short-term value creation is just not what I do. Not that there's not a time for it, not that there's not ways in which it can happen. It's just, I think like you can't cheat long-term success. Like, let's just get it out of the way. Let's just be straight about it. The idea that like, short-term price appreciation is more valuable than the long-term success of the studio and scaling of the studio is a fallacy. And
Insane.
because it doesn't make sense. And the reason is because, we have economic alignment that we want to see, everything, appreciate. And as a result of the success of the studio, the success of the IP, the success of the games is what I'm saying, not like our benefit. The games are winning and succeeding. If that happens, and when that happens, everything kind of, has way more economic value tied up in it. And the reach and distribution and scale of everything can be accelerated. And so like pretending that a short-term bump of 5% in something is going to be more valuable than a business spitting out cash into some sort of economic benefit vehicle to its token holders is a LARP. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay.
It does feel like some people are more concerned with token price than profitable businesses, which just seems like something has gone wrong in the foundation of that
Oh,
thinking.
they're correlated, right? These things are correlated.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the cash, let's take a look at like public market securities for a second, like stocks. And I know they're not analogous, but we're just going to use some referential information here to think about it. Like you feel more confident in a business that has runway and capital to be able to execute new strategies that are going to unlock new markets, right? But if there's opportunity for that business, right? When Meta spends $100 million buying OpenAI engineers, Meta's going to move into that category. Very valuable upside. Robinhood now all of a sudden is trading stock tokens, ton of new potential upside. And so like we have to think about it like this: is like what's the potential market demand for these new products, be it an AI simulation game unlike anything the market's ever seen, the ability for AI agents, be it through API or through the platform, to be able to transact across networks. Like we have to think about it more opportunistically. And then the question you have to ask yourself is how much time does this entity, this vehicle that is being used to kind of create these new opportunities have to be able to execute that successfully. And so I think in our particular case, we're looking at 2+ years runway. We feel good about it. We had to make some adjustments to be able to do that, but I think generally we have to look at it more long term. And it's like anyone who wants to look at it short term, like I really can't help you because I don't control the market. But what I can control is what we do with our time and how we try to create value, and how we can create ways for everyone else to create value, i.e. like creating wayfinding paths or extracting items from battle passes on TCG or whatever, extracting items from Colony. So I think like generally, this is a long-winded answer, but I think like really what matters is like the long tail success of the IP and the games, and maybe one's more successful than the other. I don't have a preference because what I know is that if I had one that wasn't the TCG, this is speaking to the card gamers, if I had one that wasn't the TCG that was more successful than the others, I wouldn't stop working on the TCG. And so, I'd like to see them all succeed. And sometimes they just take longer because it's a different market.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I just want to add that comment there from my own perspective. Definitely people in Web3 are used to like short time, like short time gains, especially. And if they don't see it right away, they get frustrated. So yeah.
Web3 people are used to free money for low effort, and they're spoiled as hell and need to wake up to the next chapter, in my personal opinion. But
actually, there's an alignment. There is an alignment though. It's like no problem. Play the game, earn Prime, and you get it instantaneously. Pretty quickly. I think on a 1 week cycle right now, or whatever it is, the payout. And you can either choose to hold it and long-term speculate on the ecosystem and decide whether or not what we're doing is going to be valuable or not without having to spend anything.
Yeah.
So like you have a vehicle to be able to participate in the economics of things without.
That's not what they want though, Kalos. Like just being real, like investors aren't talking about joining a bond to earn $5 a week in Prime. Like that's not, they're looking for like the $10,000 airdrop, which again, I'm saying that's not realistic, but I think that's kind of, when we're talking about short-term games, what was it 3-5 years ago? It was literally money falling in everyone's lap.
Yeah, like Prime Keys at the time, I think paid out some north of around like, I think it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars per key, right? So like that happened, and that's cool, but like it doesn't change the mission. And like those opportunities, there'll be plenty more of those opportunities if we succeed, right? So like I think, the way I think about it again is like there's so many opportunities to create new economic opportunities for everyone. But it's about the long-term success of things. And if like we succeed in that, that's fantastic. And that means we can, be long-term partners with the community to create more amazing games and more fun stuff for people to play. And if we don't, then we don't. And that's a real possibility as well, right? These are startups. This is a risk. You have to understand that, and you should. And so like look around. I think that should be, it's in, the landscape of he or she who promised, games that never delivered or died along the way is a pretty big graveyard, much larger than the ones who exist,
Insane.
right? And so the statistics Yeah, and so we've defied that odd. And so if you want to bet against people who defied that possibility so far, go for it. It's your choice. And if you don't, then that's cool too. It's really just a matter of your preference. But like, I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to keep building cool shit. I'm going to keep building cool games, and and cool tools that we think are really useful and fun.
Yep. Okay, so moving on now to the TCG. This is a question I really like. Parallel is launching at the intersection of Web3 innovation and a still skeptical Web2 player base. In the broader landscape of blockchain-enabled games, do you view the project as building towards mainstream reach or cultivating a tighter crypto-native community?
I think the game should be mainstream reach. I think, like, look at the macro of what's happening. Like, if you asked someone 6 months ago, like, if it was, there was still massive stigma associated with anything crypto related. Now you've got Robinhood tokenizing stocks. You've got the president launching tokens. Like, this is the process of normalizing. And so I think it's the opportunity is in the larger scale market. And sure, people will have moments and times, where they say the first time people encounter something new, they're always skeptical. They're always critical. What is it like? They laugh at you, then they fight you, and then they become one of you. Like, why would that be any different for? Yeah. So like, we had all kinds of drama and moments with the Hearthstone players and everyone, but like there's still tournaments that are happening and people are winning and people are having fun and people are competing and the game's still, evolving. And so I think like this idea that like, I also think there's like this fallacy in that, like this idea that like there aren't millions already of people who own crypto. Like, and so what we hasn't translated yet is the gaming sector. And that's an inevitability. Just like all this kind of, mainstream media and kind of one of the key voter topics in the United States almost seems to have been blockchain and crypto. So I think like, yeah. And so like the poly market, like it's already happening. It's just a matter of process. And so like you never focus on the smaller market. And that's why the game's kind of the focal effort of the TCG is on mobile and getting it into as many people's hands from a distribution channel that is, now becoming more and more valuable for crypto, which is the Apple App Store and the Google Play stores. So I think it's almost like loaded with the wrong information. Is like we are in the middle of the transition, and in that transition, if you look back 3, 4, 5 months ago, or whatever, it may have appeared one way, but I think like a good game is a good game, and the ability to earn will become normalized, just as it has become normalized to, and tokens will become normalized in games, just as tokens have become normalized in investment portfolios.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. People are looking for opportunity, and also the macroeconomics of the world right now are such that it's very costly, and so people are looking for a little more opportunity for themselves, right? And so I think that is another valuable kind of point to think about for people who want to be able to like you can finance your burrito on Uber Eats. Right?
Don't do that, guys. Please, don't do it. Don't go into debt for burritos.
Well, what does that tell you? Like, there's a reason someone spent time and money to be able to.
Tells me we're fucked. Pardon my French.
Yeah. So yeah. Like I think this is all going to become accelerated by AI as well, right? Just to be really clear, like disintermediating as a byproduct of any revolution. Look at the agricultural revolution, industrial revolution. So like expect more of that with the advent of AI. And so I think people end up doing, are going to end up kind of looking at these things as opportunities, and also just fun things that like you can be rewarded for.
Yeah,
I have a follow-up on this.
Look at the CS:GO skins market, right? That's a great indicator of long tail economics of games.
This is huge. Okay, CS:GO cosmetics are traded. There's no gameplay power, right? Which leads me to I really want to ask you this, and yeah, I'm just going to ask. I'll let Quinto take over after this. I know chat's mad at me for talking too much, but I'm having fun. So I tweeted something, and I feel like I'm really curious if you agree with this. So there's a schism. Here's how I see it, and this relates to Parallel. There's a schism happening in Web3 gaming. The one lane is people pivoting to shill gambling products with no judgment. Just an example of this would be YGG's LOL Land. It's literally a slot machine.
Yeah.
And a lot of other products are going in that direction. And then a lot of play to earn stuff is kind of turning into this thing of like, you spend a bunch of money and then you try to grind in a way. It's like risk reward, risk to earn. There's a lot of this stuff kind of moving towards the play to earn is kind of a gray area. Then there's like actual gambling. But then it feels like there's something else, which I would call the Web 2.5 reset. I would define it this way. People who refuse to give up on the idea of games with real ownership, great games with real ownership, they recognize that the crypto native mindset tends to lead to gambling focused products and are open to more compromise in an attempt to find product market fit with trad gamers. I have a feeling that cosmetics being the only thing on chain might even be the best path for a lot of games. Do you think that stuff I just said is directionally correct, or would you fundamentally disagree with the idea that like the crypto native stuff is going more towards gambling and we need more of a Web 2.5 kind of compromise approach? I'm just genuinely curious.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around long enough to see this kind of thing play out, be it with NFTs or tokens many times. Like there's always this rotation of like, highly speculative, everything's like lasts 5 seconds, everything's a fruit fly. It lasts like, some of these meme coin trends of content coins or whatever you want to call them, they lasted like 10 minutes
coins.
and then they died.
Yeah,
and so
don't
like,
even call them content coins, Kalos, because that just lets people pretend they're something different than what they are.
Sure, right? Like, yeah, but I think like, it's really attractive and it's very, in the short term, it's very compelling to look at some of these like high gamble, high dopamine models and be like, oh man, if we just did X, Y, and Z, it would be really valuable. But then you look at the traditional market and you have like mobile games, like kind of like a Candy Crush variant with a king, and it makes like 3 billion a year. That's way more valuable. I'd rather shoot for that and come up at 1 billion than to kind of have a short-term mindset of creating a hyper gambling game. And I think like those hyper gambling games, like we always watch them implode. Let's just be real, right? Like every one of them is imploded. And so, I think my preference is maybe somewhere in between what you described, and like, I still want to make a great game. I want to make a game my kids can play and would be like, this is awesome. I want to make a game that, people who are really into strategy card games, people can play. So like I think it's a game that should compete with the market, and we obviously have work to do there. We've made some pretty material strides, in kind of towards getting towards mobile and improving UX and UI. I know that's been a big feedback piece, but I think like I wouldn't trade. I'll say this: Parallel. If you look at some of these, I can name Parallel as a game studio that has survived years. It's been like 4 or 5 years almost now. And name me one that has lasted more than 6 months. Name me one.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. Like other games, yeah.
So imagine we go create something like that, right? Like in short service or short term, hype, and then it implodes. You're just going to end up with a bigger problem on your hands. People are going to be like, what the hell are you doing? Why didn't you create a game that people love? Like, you ask some really smart, I have the fortunate benefit of talking to, people who created some of the biggest games in the world. I was really lucky to talk to, creators of, Command and Conquer and creators of the biggest mobile games in the world. And what they'll ask you or tell you is like, create something people love. And that is, IP and content related. And that is, from my perspective, it's being able to create more immersive variants of that content and IP. So like card game, yes, but like, watching your character eat and run around and sleep and fight and whatever else. And then also controlling that character and shooting other people. And
that's what matters. That's what actually matters. That's what's going to move the token up in the long term, but people are just too confused to see it. That's all I want. Honestly, yeah. It's so true. And I was just curious if that, it's funny because I've talked to you and Gabby about this now. Gabby was my first time talking to him at all, so I was much lighter on the conversation. I didn't like hit him the hard balls, but he was very excited about the pivot towards what they call casual degen, which is essentially gambling. You're kind of taking the other side. Of course, you're both incredibly smart, and I respect you both a lot, so I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, but it's so interesting how you both have very different perspectives. I'd love one day to see y'all talk about this, actually.
Yeah, and it's not to say that there's not a market, like to be clear. I just don't think it's not parallel, right? Like this, what we're talking about is not parallel. Parallel is not a degen hyper gambling game. it's something else, and that's okay for YGG to have something like that. It's just a different segment of the market. I'm not suggesting that it's bad or it's just not what we do, and it's not what I think is the prize. And so, I wish them success if that's what they're doing, and anyone else who tries to do something different than what we're doing. But really can't think of an example of something that survived that is in that category that is compelling to me that I would say like, oh, that's an amazing IP and like I want to learn more about it or I play their next game. Like that doesn't exist, and so that's just not something that I desire or aim to do with the studio or the IP. We've spent too much time and care and too much love from like artists to create something special, and I don't think I would like,
Okay.
take that approach.
All right,
So-
Quinto, you can have some time. I'll stop interrupting for a bit.
Yeah. So just to summarize there a bit your question regarding going into mainstream, like you guys want to cross that Rubicon and get the game into mainstream. That's what you basically said. So you've like talking about this, you've proven that you can acquire players, especially with a mobile launch. How are you thinking about retention? What's the plan to keep players coming back month after month and deepening their connection to the game outside the flywheel of traditional play to earn?
So there's a couple of ways, right? Like I think, the battle pass obviously having rewards, and like the more rewards and the more frequently you can do that, the better, more valuable it is. There's a lot of correlation, obviously, with the existing demographic between token price and players, right? Like if the token goes up, there's more players all of a sudden because more people want to farm it to be able to get more tokens out because it's worth more. But I think like ultimately, you want to have it to be more accessible. And again, that's why mobile matters, right? Like if you want more players and more time from players, you have to make it more accessible to players. And so I think usability, platform distribution is probably two major pieces. And then, rewarding players and creating more upside on the playing assets for players. I think like we talk about like, I try to abstract these things so that we can just talk about them like really honestly, like you end up talking about the card game where the cards are, appreciate. You don't talk about like the card game where like the battle pass has like maybe like once in a while you're like, oh, I got a cool skin from a battle pass in the game, but like really what you care about is like, oh, my Charizard is now worth this, or oh, Blood and Bone is appreciating in price, or oh, Final Fantasy came out for Wizards of the Coast, and one of the yellow cards or whatever is worth X amount of money. Like I think that's what typically ends up piquing interest in card games is like people talking about the cards. And so I think looking at, and I know that there was an announcement today around this on the Parallel side, I think, and I don't actually know the exact details, so I'll have to leave it till the town hall. I think they announced around card burn, but I know that in Deception, it's going to look a lot more like PD1 from a supply side than anything, which is like, okay, like if that's something, if we had too large of a card supply, let's adjust it and let's go back to like smaller community, more harder to get really rare cards and make them scarce.
I'm excited about that.
and
That
yeah.
sounds really good.
Very nice.
Yeah. So yeah, the team's doing the right things. And like, I think, they are hearing like, hey, card prices are down. We know that, some people, feel that sucks. It's like, okay, well, maybe the supply was too large. Let's just like, let's over index the other way. And I think that's what, Deception will look like. It'll look a lot like Pack Drop 1. And so I think generally though, like you want to have great games and great gameplay, which means obviously good UX and exciting construction and functionality in the cards. And we've been investing there. And then you want a game like an IP and a card game that people care about, which means like content, right? Like, and again, that's also being unlocked. Like we had, a lot of the in-house, a lot of the content, like, cinematics and stuff is all of it's done in-house, to be clear. But like that is becoming unlocked. The larger the library of information and cards and visuals you have, AI is just going to unlock all of that long tail. Like, and so, that's essentially all training data sets. And like, when you look at Colony, we used it as such. And so I think, creating content is going to become something that is going to be, we do have more cinematics coming, obviously, and I think that's really valuable. But just to like let people get a taste of the world and feel like, hey, this is a different IP, and I relate to it. I'm going to try these games. Is probably the first step, and the second step is, hey, I don't have a really hardcore gaming PC, so therefore I can play on mobile. That's great. That's the second step. Third step is, I enjoy this game. I'm having fun. I'm getting rewarded, so I'm going to play more. And then the last step is, I'm going to tell other people. And like, if you look at large organizations, this really is what people describe as like a net promoter effect. We need to get back to a net promoter community where people are like, instead of like hanging on to this like one tiny thing that, hey, you never did redemption for SEs for physical cards, even though explain why it didn't work. It's like, get back with us and let's either like promote this game and share it with other people and be excited about it again. Because like, that's where the opportunity is, right? So I don't know, hopefully I'm answering your question.
Yeah, sure. So last question about the TCG.
Thought it was good. Quinto was like, yeah, whatever. I thought it was a good answer.
Yeah. No. I mean, it was good. It was good. I'm just trying to. I'm the structure guy here.
He's focused. Yeah, he's focused.
As you expand the parallel universe with other titles like Colony and Sanctuary, where does the original TCG ultimately land? Is it designed to stay the flagship, or will it take on more of a supporting role as your larger scale titles come online? And how will its cards, economies, and lore plug into those new experiences so that players feel pulled around the entire ecosystem rather than siloed in one game?
I always I don't understand this type of, I've heard this mentality, online, and like I'll be, before I answer the question, which is like, I'll just say like, I don't think, again, this is like a zero sum mentality. It's just like, is that one still going to be the best one? And you're just like, that's not the point, right? The point is like, we create new assets from cards. So like, if you want to ask yourself what the origin of content will be, sure, yes, it'll always be the card game. But like, if the world says that an AI simulation game is more popular than the card game, then that's okay. And it doesn't change things. That doesn't mean that the card game can't still be awesome. And the card game will still get, builds like we have been and new cards like we have been. And so I don't understand, or I'd encourage a different perspective maybe. I'd encourage the perspective of one, even if it's not the card game that becomes the most popular variant of the game, which no one is saying is the case. That's unproven. That's not even like, we don't know. But if it does happen, why does that make the card game any less special? And why does that make the card game any, like, if anything, it should grow the popularity of the game. And so I think we should celebrate the success of any of the products versus like, take this position that like one is going to benefit and the other one is going to hurt as a result, because they're totally different player bases.
When you say that, it's like the question is almost like, what if Colony's a big hit? Is the card game rude? It's like, Colony's a hit. Good. That's the answer.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, and I think there's this. I think it comes from this place of, if I had to guess, and like I know people have their own variations of what they say about it, but like I think it comes from a place of like fear that Colony would get all the love and all the attention and all the, but like right now, even still, the vast majority of development resources are on TCG. So like I don't think that's the case, that like all of a sudden everyone's just going to shift over. You should lean into things that are working. That's 100% true. But there's definitely a misconception around like that they don't flywheel and benefit one another. So yeah, and to answer the second part of the question, you asked about like cross compatibility or interoperability of assets. Like there already are today, right? Like you can use your avatar as a in TCG, and you can be able to use it if you play test it in Colony. You'll be able to use it in Colony, as well as in Sanctuary. So like that exists today. As for whether or not, someone asked me recently, around this like factory concept that we were working on earlier on, around like, if I have a LAR, can I pay in Prime to create a 3D version of the LAR and equip it to my guy in Sanctuary or equip it to my guy in Colony? Like that's the long tail holy grail, right, of composability. Like if we get there, fantastic. Our goal is to get to that place. But like, is it going to happen in the short term? No. Because you still need to build great games first, right? Like, what's the point in having an interoperable asset across games that suck? There's none.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's been the challenge is people preach interoperability. The first game doesn't even do well, and they don't even have resources to start number two. I mean, Parallel, for all of its flaws, has definitely taken the biggest swing I've seen outside of maybe Axie, which is a little different because they're just little circles. I like Axie, but it's a very different level of like art ambition. When we're talking about allocating resources and the idea of if the projects are in competition or synergistic with each other, I think one fear people can have is the idea of what if, I don't think this is happening, but there's the idea of what if the TCG kind of like in the background, you guys have like stopped thinking about it and all your attention's on Colony and Sanctuary. That's clearly not true just based on the conversation we've already had. But there is one question that's happened recently. It's become the rumors have been confirmed true that there has been a round of layoffs at Parallel Studios. A few of the people involved have been on the art side, the lore side, as well as community favorite Sparrows leaving his QA role. Of course, Sparrows posted a very positive tweet saying nothing but good things, all good, you know. But basically the question is, why is the TCG, or why is Parallel Studios doing layoffs in general? Why do they seem to be mostly hitting the TCG? You can say if that's true or not. And basically, is Parallel running out of money? You know, or what's going on here, basically?
No, yeah, it's a fair question. So yeah, it isn't isolated to TCG. I just think like, you know, the demand for, if you want to see, you know, top-notch artists, at the time it made a lot of sense to have some of the best artists in the world creating, you know, incredibly intricate pieces of, you know, artwork. And we can only have so many of those if the demand for NFTs is not there, right? Let's just be practical, right? And so we essentially adjusted, you know, what we thought was going to be for the best longevity of the studio. So, you know, we're in our current state after making this adjustment to the team, and there's some great people. Everyone's great. You know, everyone who worked with us that we got to work with on the TCG or otherwise were great people. And so, like, you know, Sparrows being one of them. But I think generally, like, this leaves us with north of 2 years of runway, which is a lot of time, and you want to be in that place as a startup. And I think there's this like misconception, like we're still a startup. You can still make massive mistakes. You can still, you know, you still have to take swings and risks. And so I think it's just really important to always keep that perspective. And what was most important is longevity here. And so we want to make sure we have lots of time to achieve our goals, because as you know, you and I were talking about earlier. You know, not everything goes perfectly to plan. Sometimes things take longer, especially when you're doing complex things with AI and with crypto. And so, yeah, like, you know, again, to reiterate, like it ends, you know, the result of that adjustment to the team, which isn't isolated just to the TCG, it was folks that we thought, you know, were good people, but we decided we're probably, you know, not in our strategic view for the next 2-3 years. Left us with north of 2 years of runway. So that's where we want it to be.
Okay.
And like these things, again, go ahead.
No. Please continue.
Please continue.
Yeah, you've got to be smart about these things, right? Like, you know, sometimes you want to burn aggressively when you're chasing a goal, and if the market changes, you want to, you know, adjust with it. And so I think generally our approach was like, you know, we're pursuing a number of products. We believe them to be very valuable long term. And although we have a lot of love for some of the folks that we had to say goodbye to, it was in the best interest of the studio's success. And so, you know, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
You have to make tough calls, and that's the job. And so I think ultimately it positions us to win. And like, you know, I think if you ask, you know, most anyone who from that group, you know, who we had to say goodbye to, if you ask them, I think they'd say like, yeah, like they'd definitely pick up the phone if we called and said, hey, we've got an opportunity. And so our goal is to get back to that place of like, you know, incredible success and business sustainability, and being able to invest further into more lore, more, you know, more art, more things that are, you know, valuable to the IP. But sometimes it's just healthy to be sober. Like, look at the NFT market.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, this is one of those times where
So wait, if
sometimes
I
you
look at the
grow,
NFT market, I
sometimes you
won't
shrink.
want to be sober. If I do that, I need to have a drink. So you just, that was,
But I think generally it's like things have a natural cadence to them, right? They grow and they shrink and they grow and they shrink. And startups are, are tough in that regard because you want to invest in things that you think are really valuable and are going to create value for shareholders and for investors and token holders and everyone. And you want to see the studio succeed. And like, I think ultimately time and market's going to matter. And I think we're one of the very few left standing, and we will be here in over 2 years continuing to build. And so that was what was important to me, and without giving up any deliverables. So like none of the deliverable timelines have shifted as a result. We're still confident on that. Be it for Colony, Sanctuary, TCG, Wayfinder. But it sucks, right? Like these are people I call friends. These are people I worked with for four years, and but at the same time, we have nothing but appreciation for them, but it was the right thing to do. So.
Yeah.
And just a quick one. Is there any plans to use AI for art? This is the kind of half joke people are saying, oh, they're going to start using AI. Is there any plans to start using AI, or are you guys going to stick to the art being all human?
Well, I mean, Colony is an AI-based game, right? There's a lot of.
Yeah, I'm talking about the card game specifically for sure, not Colony, of course. Different.
Yeah, I don't think we have any immediate plans for that, unless like the training data set got so good that like it made sense to go down that road. Like, was just not in our plan.
Cool.
Like, if you're asking me, is the next set an AI generated set? It's not.
Yeah, just
and like
some people,
I'm still a card collector, and I get it. I get it. Like I collect cards too. Like I get it. You want to have like an Oscar Mar or a Cafaro or Sasha V. Like I get that there's still an emotional attachment to these artists, and some sort of element of human creation. And I think like it almost becomes valueless in people's minds if it isn't created by a human because there's no scarcity in the ability to create. And I think that's lack of scarcity is great for content. I don't think it's so great for cards. And so
I appreciate you saying that as an artist coming from art. Like I was a drummer my whole 20s before I got into this. Like a lot of people on the business side, they can't at least see that side of it. So I appreciate you at least recognizing, because I have heard business people who essentially are like, artists are obsolete now, lol. It's just like, okay, come on. So I appreciate you just having the ability to kind of see that aspect of it is refreshing for me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, that's not in the immediate plans, no.
Okay. Yeah, very, very fair answer, Kalos. Thanks for that, for clearing that out. So moving on now, going into Wayfinder. First question regarding Wayfinder. You've emphasized convenience as a core principle. What concrete steps are you taking to make Wayfinder's experience frictionless for non-technical users?
Well, I think if you looked at the kind of development path of kind of simplifying the signing of a transaction as a recent builds, from I think the whole thing kind of answers the question itself. It feels like a weird question to me because if you want to be able to take a token, take dog with hat on Solana, bridge it to Arbitrum, and then swap it, to something else, and then put it in, I don't know, on some pool on Aave on mainnet, you can do that with like one sentence. And so I think like in and of itself, it actually can simplify complexity. But I don't think that's the ultimate objective of the tool. Like I think people will use it for day-to-day tasks like, hey, like let me send this thing to Quinto and Qflux or whatever else. But I think, the purest form of complexity is actually not like a UX problem. It's actually, I don't have to do it myself at all. Yeah. And that's the promise of this technology. And so that's where the autonomous agent work comes in. And I think a lot of people, and part of it is like, we saw something like this coming. And the other part of it is like, it happened as it happened. And I think that's like makes people uncomfortable, is that we are allowing things to evolve as the space evolves and our understanding of what's going to make a lot of value for people evolves. But I think like, the foundational base layer is really this transaction agent and contract agent, right? These two things. And in and of themselves, like, vibe coding software suites, in Web 2, traditional, vibe coding, those are incredibly valuable. But then like on top of that transactability and that ability to create smart contracts, and the ability to expand the graph from that, the valuable piece is actually this autonomous layer. And the autonomous layer is really where, and it's not isolated to like yield optimization or just like anything. It's about arbitrary complexity. And like, what that means to someone like who's in the space today is like, if you're like managing an LP position, right, and you're making some money there, and you're copy trading some other wallet and you're making some money there, and maybe you're TWAPing in or out of some other token and you're making some money there, and then you're using USDC and optimizing yield and making some money there. These are all independent autonomous agents that can do them for you, so you don't have to do any of those things anymore. That's the goal. The goal is like whatever creative way, and that's why arbitrary complexity matters, and that's why a true natural language platform matters. Not something that's tied to like Telegram bots, but like something that's able to understand the complexity of what you're asking it to do, and it's going to create new order types. Even like if this happens, essentially there are conditional statements. Like if this, then that statements. So like if this happens and this happens on this day when the moon is like this, then do this. And so it's almost like, but
I like
at the
that.
same time, it'll just,
full moon strategy.
Yeah, exactly, full moon strategy. But so I think generally, if to kind of come back to answering the question and simplifying what I'm trying to say, is that it's the easy answer here is, oh, we're going to focus on this usability or this button or this signing a transaction or whatever. That's all nonsense. That is that is stuff. When you're competing with something that you can do today in another wallet, it's very difficult. And if you have the knowledge, which a lot of Web3 native people do, as to how to bridge from this network to that network, and sure, we can save you some time, right? And like switching or wrapping, as I like to call it, bridging and swapping, like you can save a little bit of time. Sure, that's great. But like, is that an immense value? Is that a 0 to 1 moment? No, because you can do it today, even if you had the knowledge and you had the research. What's valuable and you can't do today is the arbitrary complexity, being able to automate the functions entirely with intelligence by an autonomous agent to do all the things you want to do and allow it to do it for you. And then what it should look like is on a daily basis, I get a notification or an email and it's like, here are the 10 autonomous agents you have running. Do you want to keep them running, stop them? And here's how many transactions they did. And here's the P&L on that account. Like one of them's copy trading Ansem. One of them's TWAPing into this token. One of them's, optimizing yield on USDC or ETH or whatever else. And like, do you want them to continue or do you want them to stop? That's literally what you should be after. And then seeing longer tail, seeing what other people are doing and adopting those strategies. And so I think, ultimately that's where I see like the macro of it going. And in the shorter term, what that means is like a lot of people creating paths and creating value on the agent by teaching it to do new things that it can't do, that we're not teaching it to do.
The light bulb just went off. The Web 2 product. Tired of your yearly subscriptions hitting you after you forgot about them? Have Wayfinder do it all through Wayfinder and have it like just say no when it's not one you expected, and then you can, instead of your bank account that just always says yeah, like little like
just keep saying
you're
yes.
Gonna forget about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, am I answering your question?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So, moving on as a kind of a follow-up. So for Wayfinder, what is the next milestone that you think will drive market interest and user adoption most significantly?
Autonomous agent, what we just talked about.
Okay. So for sure, the autonomous agent. Okay, sounds good. So
and I think the Wayfinder account, I don't know if I think this week they announced that some of the early access, there's a bunch of people who have early access to it now. I don't know exactly which group of people that is, but I'd have to ask.
Okay, sounds good. So much of the broader Wayfinder platform is still in the works, yet Prompt is already live. Looking back, was launching the token ahead of those key features a strategic move to seed the economy, or might have you preferred to wait? How are you keeping holders engaged and confident until the promised utilities fully roll out?
I don't really look back on things and think like, oh, like, I don't regret it. Like, I think we from a validator standpoint, I think it would have been nice to have the validators up and the collateralizing ready. And the key there is like getting the right validators on board, like QuantStamp and ChainSafe Systems and a bunch of really reputable folks to look at some of these paths that people create. Because the weird part is like the functionality is there. We built it. Anyone who was in early testing could have used it, created custom wayfinding paths. But the security infrastructure to be able to collateralize those and protect the entire player user base from interacting with those was not there. And so I would have loved to have that in. That would have been nice because that would have unlocked a lot of ability to utilize the token more. But I don't know, like there's only so many variables you can control, and yeah, like I don't. Looking back on it, it would have been nice for sure. But I don't think it takes away from the potential value and upside of this thing. Like I think there's like, again, I have a perspective on this that is like slightly doomerism. But like this stuff is changing everything. Like, and having the ability to obtain, prompt, be it, look, if it doesn't look pretty to you today, is what it is. But like the reality is that you don't have OpenAI stock, you don't have Perplexity, you don't have exposure to these, mega model at scale platforms. And if, what our goal is to create the kind of base method by which agents are interacting with on-chain systems. And if we can do that best, then that's really valuable to anyone who has it. I just think a lot of people are not seeing where this is going with AI. I think we're underestimating the impact this is going to have. And even if the market's valued NVIDIA at an immense amount of money and OpenAI and so on, the best agent to be able to interact with on-chain networks when that is becoming the de facto method by which even stocks are going to be traded, is incredibly valuable. Like, do you think that, whatever the settlement time is on traditional markets are just going to be obliterated by real-time settlement with blockchains? Do you think that people are going to continue to trade stocks long tail on networks? And then you add in autonomous agents operating on risk parameters that are arbitrarily complex trading for you. Like that is like a superpower in your hands. And so, there's always things that you look at and say, oh, it's spilled milk and could have done this differently, could have done that differently. But ultimately what really matters, a game, just like in the game, is like a quality game and a quality product that scales. And you build a quality product that scales and it solves all problems.
Collateralized paths seems like such a big unlock because it enables ROI and activity for multiple people, right? If I'm understanding, it's a long white paper, but it's like the person who makes the path is going to have access to a lot of potential earnings. People who contribute collateral have earnings, and then people can also just use those paths, so it increases the usability. People talk about flywheels a lot, and it feels like that collateral, not thinking through the whole thing right now from scratch, but it really feels like that is a flywheel unlock kind of piece of that Wayfinder puzzle.
It is and it isn't, right? Again, everything's predicated on scale, right? Like, so yes, it is. I'm not trying to take away at all from what you.
I could be wrong. Please tell me if I'm wrong, because I don't know.
You're not wrong. But what matters is that the total throughput is also there. If the total throughput on those paths is not material, then it's actually not beneficial, right? Because then you're like, okay, so I have $50,000 locked up, but I only earn $100.
It's inefficient capital at that point. Right?
Exactly. Okay. And so you have to have a certain amount of scale, which means you have to do something that you can't do otherwise. And it adds material value to a large amount of volume. And if you don't have that volume, then it feels like you're kind of racing to get something done that isn't going to be material enough. And so this is why autonomous agent matters so much.
Okay. Yeah. Really good briefing there for Wayfinder. And let's move on.
There's a good question. Quinto, do you mind? There's a really good question in chat. It's smarter than either one of us could ask, maybe. Let me just this one, and then I'll get out of the way again.
Go ahead.
Lofty asked, how are they working to train their Raven model, and what makes it better at crypto than previous models they've used, like DeepSeek?
So Adrian would have to answer this question exactly. Okay. A lot of the data that we obtain from the use of the platform, though, is valuable to training the model. The interesting part is sometimes we don't use the model, and sometimes we do use the model. There's a lot of risks to using a collection of different models that are publicly available and or privately made available. That models can shut off, models can change. So you always have to have kind of Raven in the background as like a backup model. And sometimes we use it and sometimes we don't. Right now, I don't think actually Adrian's using it as much. But he would have to speak to the exact training of the model. But I do know that transaction throughput and usability from usage from existing people who have interacted with Wayfinder also contributes to the data set that he uses to train the model. But you could probably pull him, wrangle him when he's less busy on here, and you can pin him down specifically on AI questions.
Next interview. All right, we got to get Adrian. Awesome. All right, Quinto, go ahead.
Awesome. So now moving on to Parallel Colony. Colony is charting new ground in Web3 as a first of its kind 1.5 player game, where AI agents run the world and the human player gently steers. What design choices will keep that light touch model as compelling and replayable as the more hands-on experience that traditional gamers are used to?
So I think, the question is what is the light touch that will make it compelling to be replayable?
Yeah, what design choices will keep that light touch model as compelling and replayable as more people experience that compared to what traditional gamers are used to?
So I think there's a couple pieces here. One is like the resounding feedback from all the tests has been like, if we can make you connect with your character, meaning the AI agent that you've constructed is someone you actually like interacting with, that is extremely sticky. And it's a push your luck game, right? So like every level that you play, you're kind of having a greater deal of risk to your character, your avatar expiring, let's call it. And so I think, from a replayability standpoint, you have a lot that you can do to influence without direct control your agent, and that a lot of that has to do with relationship building. One in part with you and your agent, and in addition to that, with other agents to your agent. So I think like what we created to kind of rolled up to over the last little while on a build is this kind of health of the colony index, and using that as an inference as to how much you should engage or not engage with what's happening. But it is a push your luck model as a game, so I think it like has some familiarity to the market. But as for what's the most sticky part, that is really the personality, right? It's the personality of the agent and your ability to connect with that agent and understanding with each other. Like if you've ever played Colony with an agent that you constructed and that like you didn't exactly get along with, it's like really, really tough. And if you have an agent that you have constructed and you do get along with, it's makes the game much more enjoyable. And so our focus has been on ensuring that connection. Because if we don't get that right, then it's just like arguing with a bot, right? Like, and no one wants that. And so, and that's also like extremely valuable. Like if you actually are able to build connection between a player and a AI, it's almost like, how much is it worth to you a month to not have your best friend die, right? Like these things become kind of weird questions, and it should be a weird question, right? Because it's not a game that we have an example to compare it to. It's almost like, why is OpenAI creating memory? Why is memory so valuable for OpenAI? Which is a recent, addition, I think that was like 3-4 weeks ago. And again, memories and agents are persisting. And so I think really the answer for replayability is like the stakes continue to go up and your relationship deepens. And so that's why people, I think, like it. And it's different. It's nothing. There's nothing you can compare it to.
Yep. So we're essentially trying to build here AI girlfriends and boyfriends, so people can make a connection. I mean,
yeah, I'm
just
not
a
interested
joke,
in that. Like,
but yeah,
I get it. Yeah, like I'm sure someone's gonna build like I know there are already people working on like boyfriends, girlfriends, like AI porn, AI this, AI all the sexualized stuff that sells, right? That's not what this is. I think this is more like a teammate and like maybe, and I don't, I'm gonna like say something. This is not something we're working on, but like it's just a cool idea. It's like imagine you start playing Sanctuary, and then like you can pull in your avatar to be your like teammate.
Yeah.
Like like these are things that are going to become possible. Like your avatar or your character in Colony can become like cross compatible. And so I think like we don't know what the future is going to look like yet. All we know is that like if you are interested in AI and you're interested in gaming, you're probably going to be interested in Colony.
Yeah.
And if you have ever read the Google Simulacra paper, which pretty much everyone in AI has, you probably never played a game like it. And that's what this is. It's like almost like a version of steroided interactable Google Simulacra paper. And so, yeah, I'm not so interested in like the waifus and the girlfriends and the hyper dopamine porn or whatever else that's going to come from AI. I'm sure there's lots of folks who are going to be investing in that and making that valuable in some meaningful way. I'm more interested in how we can create a game with an AI character that you enjoy playing the game with,
Yeah.
and you care about their survival, and their world is expanding. I think those are things I care about.
Yeah, when I see
Anyone?
when I said
Go ahead.
the boyfriend and girlfriend analogy is more to highlight a connection with your
Yeah.
with your character. So like in the case, for example, imagine my World of Warcraft character that has thousands of hours played. If I could interact with it in a way where he can tell me history of us playing, for example, like this is the vision, like making a connection.
Well, or imagine like not booting up for a week, and then you get there and he's like all beat up, he's super tired, his health is down, and he's like, "Where the fuck you been?"
So I don't want that. I'll just say personally, I actually think the whole AI friend thing is pure dystopian. I think it's terrible. I really think, just my opinion. You don't have to like. It's fine. Everyone different opinions. But
No, yeah.
where I see it as actually being interesting is, I'll just put this out there. AI navigation. I want to use in the long term. I want to go into Parallel TCG and tell the game, hey, go to the priming and load in the highest ranked deck for Neve, and it just does it for me. Stuff like that to reduce button clicks for navigation, super compelling to me. Personally, I think AI friends and stuff is literally just going to ramp up the loneliness epidemic, and everyone needs to go to therapy and like go talk to humans. That's just my personal opinion. Like if you have an AI boyfriend, you need help, like, or a girlfriend. So like, I'm just going to put it out there. Like everyone's going to disagree with me and everyone's going to say I'm just whatever. But like, I really feel like the AI being your friend thing is a complete red herring, like false path. And the real path forward is making it just navigation and all the things you don't want to deal with. Clicking through 10 different menus, AI should do all that stuff for you. That's my like super out of left field opinion. You don't have to like work with that or whatever. But
I'll comment. I'm not saying that it's not dystopian. I just think that is unavoidable, and it is the path that we're on.
that's
Hundreds of billions of dollars are being invested in this.
Yeah.
If you think that like, and it doesn't have to be a character, but like, there's a reason OpenAI has memory, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's going to be anthropomorphized. It's going to become a person or a character, and then it's going to be in a physical form, right? Like, Tesla and a number of others have commented around the greatest consumer demand product of all time is going to be humanoid robots, and that's it's going to be more popular than the iPhone, and everyone already has like 10 phones per person kind of thing. And so I do believe that to be true, although it's unfortunate. I'm not the judge of what's right or wrong. All I'm looking at is the probability and likelihood of it happening. And I think we have the brain and the ability to create intelligence forming, and a lot of investment pouring into that. And we have a form factor being created so that intelligence can exist in the real world. And there's multiple companies, not just Tesla, creating humanoid robots. And ultimately, that's going to displace humans in a material way.
Yeah, lots
sorry to be the bearer of bad news,
lots to
but
talk about in that subject. I really like it. I really like this where this conversation went, because definitely opens up the mind to explore new ideas and think bigger. So yeah, moving on with Colony. Colony rewards players in Prime through on-chain AI agents using parallel avatar NFTs. That's the idea. How do you envision the incentive structure working over time?
So it's a push your luck game. So and a Koji game would have to speak more in detail to it, but every time you pass a challenge, your risk reward goes up. Your difficulty goes up, but your potential reward goes up. And that is the general structure of the game. I won't ruin too much, but essentially, the things that you can do to help manage the risk, one as an individual and collectively as a colony, will require more coordination. And your goal is just to not die, right? And you always have an out. You can pull, shoot, and like extract items so that if you think you're going to die late in the game, but the price goes up, to be able to do so as you go. And so you kind of have this choice at any given time, as to whether or not you think you're going to make it. And really, like, the metric by which you're looking at is the general health of the colony in relation to the oncoming crisis. And so maybe the crisis is a solar storm, maybe it's famine, maybe it's X, Y, and Z. And then the objective is to continue to expand the world. Like, it's one thing to put a really smart. Imagine like creating an artificial intelligence and putting it in a small box with 5 things. After watching it interact with 5 things, you kind of want to see it interact with a bigger box. And so, as intelligence, AI models continue to improve, our objective is to continue to expand the world and give it more and more interesting variations of things to interact with, and create more complexity in what you do and how you do it with your agent.
Okay, that's a fair answer. Really interesting. I have never before heard how was the model designed, but definitely interesting for a game like Colony. Were you gonna ask something? Flux? Yeah.
Kalos, please continue.
No, it's just an oversimplification of like what I think Koji can do a much better job.
Okay.
Kind of explaining.
I was just gonna say, like, my entire goal in Colony is to have the least productive, like, hippie colony of like artists, and to an unrealistic degree where we eventually get destroyed by Quinto's like army or something. Like, that's all I want to do. So if I can do that and I have to spend 0 time optimizing my resources, then I'll play a lot of Colony. If I have to actually like try to be effective on the base building, I'm doomed. It's over.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to win. This is the weird part about these types of games again, right? Like, there's no real, like, you have to put some conditions on a game like this because there's no goal otherwise. And so, like, if you don't have, but having said that, like, it doesn't
It's like
mean
Civ,
that
right? Not to cut you off, but like Civ,
Yes.
you can through war or through culture, etc.
Yeah, but it's also like there's not necessarily one way to achieve it. So, like, it could be that an artist colony is really good at surviving some event, that otherwise would be really difficult if you were like a very heavily resourced, oriented colony. And so I don't think, and this is where it gets weird. It's like, it's not something, a game that we've encountered, because it's like, how do you balance a game like that? How do you make sure that, there's so many, there's an infinite number of variables, because variables can be created. So the only thing you can really do is create milestones that become increasingly difficult. You don't try to constrain the best part, which is the AI. You try to allow it to find new creative ways to solve the problem and create harder and harder problems to solve, and create greater requirement of interaction between agents. Because, like, you can have a guy micromanaging, right? Like, you can be the guy who's like just talking to his agent all the time, but like, if you get to a certain, that'll take you only so far, where if you're not working together with your other colony members and they're not talking and you're not coordinating, then it's going to be difficult to survive.
This makes me think of, just to jump in here, it makes me think of chess after AI beat, the Deep Blue thing, and computers can beat humans. There was like a brief phase of, what if we have human plus computer teams play against each other? The problem in chess, this is done for prep, of course, these days, but the reason one reason it probably didn't work is if a human and a computer team up during the game, the human is irrelevant. The computer is the only feedback that matters. It sounds like the company's game design challenge is to basically solve that problem. How do you create a game where a human and an AI are working together, and the human's input is equally important as the AI? Like, you aren't the equivalent of, a grandmaster sitting next to a computer that's 100 times better than them, where all they can do is basically pick the move the computer chooses. Like, there's something there.
I think the analogy makes sense when there's a right answer. And there is no right answer. There is no, this is kind of what I was trying to allude to, right? There's no one way in which you achieve that objective. And so how you go about achieving it is really as a byproduct of your creativity. And so I think ultimately that allows the humans to stay relevant.
Yeah.
And it could be that there will be colonies or, whatever that, because like, it's not like, this is also not static. Like the level of intelligence of these agents is not static. And so it could very well be that the whole thing just ends up becoming something we watch, right? And like, we listen to the conversations. We don't actually interact as much anymore because they know better than we do. And we're just curious as to what the hell they're going to do.
That's it. That's what I was excited. I think that's the alternative. And then we can move to the next question because I don't want to, the chat's going to get mad at me again. Chat's like, what does deception packs cost? Shut up, chat. Like, that's not Kalos's question. Shut up. Sorry, I love you, chat. But I feel like what I want to see and what I imagine some people will want to see, if the market disagrees, the market always wins, and I acknowledge it. But basically, feeling like I'm looking at my own ant farm version of Lord of the Rings. Like, there's this epic story, and I'm checking in on this book or this TV show the same way I'm going and reading, Stormlight Archive for the last 6 months and talking too much about. Like, it's like the equivalent of like reading a fantasy book or a sci-fi book, but you're kind of like choose your own adventuring and ant farming it. Like, to me, that is a much more compelling idea than the AI friend thing. Although, again, I think there's probably people who want both. Sure. AI friend could be more popular, but that's the one that hits me, and I'm just like, yes, that sounds cool. That's where I get excited personally.
Yeah, and like I know, like I'll just acknowledge something. I know, like people were like a bit disappointed that things weren't like as ready as we'd hoped, early on for Colony. And I know we did play tests, and I know we're on track for that now. But I think like the reason was because actually one of the things we realized along the way was it's not only valuable as a parallel game Colony. Like if you look at it, like you could just remove the training data that says you're Augencore, you're Shroud, or whatever, and make it like you're Mickey Mouse and you're Goofy, and change the visual, and it's now Disney World. And so like I think platforming it to be flexible is very valuable. And so that was one of the things that we did strategically, and kind of one of the choices we made was, hey, go back and just adjust some of the infrastructure to be able to support longer tail, potentially support other IPs. And that way you can, if you want to use QFlux's analogy, it's like you could flip channels and watch, Disney World versus watching Parallel versus watching a world of, I don't know, humans like us.
That's really cool, actually. Okay, that's very cool.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I've heard. I'm going to be completely dead honest. Up until you said that, I haven't really seen how I would use Colony. That's the first time I'm like, oh, that could be really fun. So that's because I don't really like base building. So like, I'm always thinking, okay, what else can I do? That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And like, we're not satisfied with content, there's not just one channel of any of content on any of these systems. And so how do you platform it? And the answer is like you work potentially longer tail. You try to work with other IPs to be able to allow people to have multiple worlds. And maybe, the sci-fi world becomes uninteresting to you, and that game becomes uninteresting to you for some time. And so you want to refresh and maybe go to some like Water World where Kevin Costner is on a boat with a tomato plant, whatever it may be. I think like the point though is like longer tail. We made some strategic decisions, which were tough, to start the work to be able to accept other types of pieces of content, in the long term. So, yeah.
All right, Quinto, get us back on track. I've taken us off into a tangent.
Yeah. Moving on now to Sanctuary. First question here is, Sanctuary is an ambitious PvPvE shooter in a genre where even AAA studios struggle. Why should players believe Parallel can deliver something competitive and polished?
I think if you were at the Worlds, you would have seen where we were 6-7 months ago, and I think that would have been surprising to most people. So I think like I would actually push back on that approach. I don't think this is like a immediate how do I explain this? I think that like yes, there's a large segment of games that that exist today. I think there's a unique spot for us to fit there. but I think like this is the first foray into like you control a 3D character running around in a world, and maybe the first variant of the game is this kind of PvP, PvPvE, but I think like ultimately our goal is to create more immersive games, and like without having our foot in what that game looks like in its final. I guess what I'm trying to say is what that game looks like in its final state may not be much more expansive and narrative driven than like a multiplayer third person shooter. And so, but like we're able to create that very cost effectively as a result of our partnership with, obviously V3, who are great partners to us. But I think ultimately, like, we're talking about it as like something that is our initial goal, and like whether or not, if you like, the longer you hear me talk about these things, the more you hear me talk about like, okay, so I'll tell you what I think the next major step is. The next major step is like an extraction-based third-person shooter. But like, is that the end vision and goal for all it's going to be? No. And so, I look at it like that would be a great milestone to be able to take the next major leap. And the next major leap to me would be a narrative-based game. And so, like, are we going to be there? Is that going to happen? I can't promise that, nor am I saying that that's what we're working on, because we're not. We're working on taking the first major leap. But I think we're well on the way. I think like to say like, hey, you're not going to be able to compete, or hey, how far along are you? If you were at the Worlds, you played the third person shooter, and you saw where we were 6 months ago, and I can tell you we're a lot further along than when you saw it. So I think we're well on track for that. And I think there's a number of things that Astro, who is kind of Astro and P-Pain, who are the two major kind of designers on that game, have put into it that add a flavor that is our own. But yeah, like I think it's always going to be a challenge to, and this kind of almost highlights the point I was making with Colony, right? Like and Wayfinder is like going from 0 to 1 is a lot easier than going into a market where there are incumbents. There's something to compare it to, and everyone's like initial reaction is always like, oh, well, what are you going to do to be different? And I think I think the answer here is like our goal originally is to have value in the extraction of the assets from the game, to create a more meaningful experience for you to be able to interact with use your play as your characters, and to create the foundation for us to be able to create fully immersive games and build that bench strength as a team, because we've never done that before. We've cut our teeth and built our bench strength on TCG. We've cut our teeth and built our bench strength now on AI simulation games. And now we're doing the same thing for a third-person shooter with our partner studios. And so as we learn and build that muscle, our goal is to create something bigger than just a third-person shooter. And like, if we're afforded that opportunity, is really at the public's discretion. If they think that what we make is awesome and they support us, then that's fantastic, and it'll allow us to finance additional builds and games. And if they don't, then the market speaks, and that's it. So I think ultimately, if you want to get into the detailed mechanics of why it's different, you'd have to talk to Astro. I'm more on the periphery of it at the moment.
Yeah. This really good answer to the question, and it actually answered my second question. So yeah, I'm gonna move on to the third one. In this case, and this one kind of relates to Colony and to the TCG. So, which is, how are you balancing blockchain integration with gameplay? Will players truly own their items, and how do you avoid turning it into a loot cash out game? And this is kind of all encompassing for all the games.
Well, wouldn't you call CS:GO a loot cash out game then?
No.
Like if you're getting boxes and people are selling those boxes and those skins and those assets?
Nope.
You wouldn't?
I mean, I wouldn't call it a loot cash out game.
Can you
CS:GO.
define for Kalos? This is my one area where the chat haters can have me shut up. I don't know shooters that well, but can you, for both of us, maybe define what is your definition of loot cash out game?
So essentially, games that are played, well, it's commonly known in Web3 because people play the games just to earn whatever they can earn, in this case tokens, and then cash it out This is what I'm referring to.
So if they're only playing for the money, but that feel Cal can answer. That feels like basically the play to earn question in general is if they're playing to earn, is that only the reason? So I guess it's like
no. How do you avoid turning it into?
Yeah, how do you
only
avoid
this
that
loot cash?
basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you avoid? I mean, I think this kind of comes back to like a battle pass like problem, right? It's this kind of problem exists across all Web3 games. Let's just be like honest about it, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's an answer here. Yeah, like it's like people buy battle pass and then farm out a card or whatever, and then get prime, and some people choose to sell it. So like, but I think that exists in everything. It's like some people farm CS:GO crates to get whatever, a really rare knife, a blue knife, and sell it. So like I think like anti-Sybil and anti-bot is important, because particularly as economic rewards are incentivized, but having a model analogous to that of like crate opening is probably healthy to be able to realize economic benefit from that. And also as more and more distribution occurs, your objective is to make odds statistically favor make it more difficult statistically for high rarity items to be pulled, because there's essentially you're inflating supply. But I actually don't think this problem is isolated at all to Web3. I think it's amplified in Web3, right? But I don't think it's isolated.
I think if you think about the question, why should players believe Parallel for something could have market? Same thing applies to this TCG. It's not like card games are some new, amazing, innovative idea, right? Like that's the thing of card games. Oh my god, there's so many card games. It's almost the same conversation, and it's kind of just maybe as simple as just make it really damn good and then see if the market accepts it. Basically, like, it kind of feels like almost, because I used to think, oh, why are they doing a third-person shooter? Extraction shooters are so like, but it's just every game is overdone. Like, what other than Colony and the AI thing, which is the 0 to 1 thing? Like, what is the genre that's like, this is it? This is the perfect genre. All the games are succeeding. That's not really a thing, is it? Like, if it is, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah.
I wanna comment that something, and as a follow-up of what you're saying, Flux, and about this topic, and it's something that it's been on my mind for a while. So regarding that question, how do you create a game that players won't just use it as a loot cash out? Again, like I remember Pokemon, for example. The first time I remember Pokemon was from getting those little circles from the chips. Do you remember that? I don't know if you had it in your countries, but like the fact that Pokemon was everywhere. There were TV shows, there were games, there were even these little, like there were all kinds of toys. Like this thing went with full on. And I know this is a different era, like a different times, different market, because this is like Japanese culture or whatever, but it's more coming from that place where it's like, how do you, what are the key components that make a game or an IP that successful?
Or statues. They're done. It's over. Done. The more beautiful. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think what you're referring to is actually what I was saying earlier, Quinto, is distribution and scale.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's distribution, what you're describing. Putting Pokemon in potato chip bags. I think distribution and scale come when you have quality games that brands can put their reach behind. Like if the game is not good, why would anyone do a distribution deal with you? Right? Like it's attaching a great brand name to a terrible brand name, to a terrible product. And so I think, that to me is really what you're describing. And I think the reason that works is because there's demand from a market segment of like children eat potato chips. They probably shouldn't because it's not great for them, but children eat potato chips and children like Pokemon. I don't know what that deal structure looks like, but we're going to distribute it. We're going to try to broaden the reach and distribution of this IP as a result. And maybe Pokemon paid for it. Maybe it paid Pokemon so they could sell more chips. I don't know.
I have a good question.
Generally,
The investors will like this. What's Parallel's Pudgy moment? When do we see something like, the Pudgy Pluffies in Walmart that kind of was the beginning of the Pudgy glorious relaunch 2.0, Luca making it amazing? Like, do we have anything that you can speak to with regards to like sort of a Pudgy moment for Parallel IP, something in Target, Walmart, like, or is the answer just honestly not yet?
I mean, physical cards were sold by Rakuten, which is like the Japanese Walmart. I don't, so I think like that is the same thing we're talking about is distribution, right? And I think it comes to two things. It comes to content and it comes to assets. So like content meaning like, could you get a parallel longer narrative trailer into something like Love, Death, and Robots, right? Something like that. Or product, can you get physical cards put into every cereal box for Kellogg's? So, yeah. And so I think we're definitely looking at stuff like that. But I wouldn't discount us to say that we haven't had a Pudgy moment. Getting into Rakuten is pretty impressive in and of itself, but I understand the sentiment. And I think the question is like, how do we obtain more distribution? And I think before you obtain distribution,
there's a difference. There's a difference. I'm going to push back on this. So you guys fly right from hardball. The difference is Pudgy stuff was physically there in stores. The Rakuten is purely digital. I think that's a huge difference because people aren't walking by the shelves and seeing it. You can't tell your friend if you go to like when my mom sees the Beast bars in Walmart and then I show her the Beast reality show. My mom is now the biggest Mr. Beast fan in the world because the reality show is good and then she got a chocolate bar. Like is there? Yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like, I mean, I don't think that having a box of parallel cards in like, I don't know, the local card shop here makes a difference in a lot of ways. We've done some distribution strategy stuff like that in different regions.
We're talking Walmart, not local shops. I'm just pushing back on this one really hard to be specific. Pudgy moment was in Walmart. It's why it was so big. If it was in like a local hobby shop, it wouldn't have been that moment.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'm not trying to steal their flowers, or if that's what you're suggesting. I think like
no, I'm just honestly curious. I'm giving you a hard time on this one because I just felt like it.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I think I don't know what that looks like yet. I think that's the answer. I think like there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I don't think like the physical toys. You have to understand that like some of these IPs that have those types of distributions, models, are very children oriented. Right? Like having a Pokemon in a chip bag makes a ton of sense. And so your distribution opportunities are different for sci-fi themed IP than they are for, and the ones that do make it find distribution typically on their own first. So like Star Wars found distribution on its own well before anyone worried about putting lightsabers or whatever into cereal boxes. So I think like, I don't know what that looks like yet. I think it comes from building a successful game first, right? Like,
so just to wrap it up, and like I mean, everything we have talked about, and following up this latest conversation, the last question of today. So many ways to play has been your internal mission, and you've often said Parallel is built for gamers, not speculators. Now that multiple tokens, NFT incentives, and play-to-earn loops are in motion, how are you keeping that motto alive, ensuring the fun and community stays center stage while financial rewards remain a bonus rather than the main driver?
I think like, actions speak louder than words. I think like a lot of the builds recently have been focused on usability, UX, mobile. And then I think once that's in place and distributed to a global level, which I think is, we're well on track for. I think the goal there is then to get back to like localized tournaments, at kind of saturated areas and make that more and more, available to people. So I don't know that anything other than focusing on usability and distribution matters, right? Like, because like once you have, it's important that everyone can play it. This is like the first thing. It's like one, it's you have to create a great game. Then you have to be able to create a way that everyone can play it, and like reducing the barrier to participation is super important. And like you can't have a really high-end gaming PC be the requirement for people to be able to play it. It's just not an option. And so that's where the energy is going, and that way you can have more people playing it and more people can compete, and therefore you can have greater community associated with it.
What if?
Yeah.
What if we make the PC client even more intense, everything video looping, super high fidelity, and just roll with it, and then just make the mobile client really good? And then the thing becomes, you can't play the PC, deal with it, instead of trying to make it just barely, because you already kind of made that mistake of launching a really high-end card game. Like, so maybe just go with it.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, any upgrade that we've kind of synced up the two builds, right? So like now upgrades that mobile's going to get is going to push into desktop as well.
That's fair.
I wouldn't call launching a card game a mistake. I think it's like
no. That wasn't the mistake. The mistake would be making it so it doesn't run on potatoes, or not having like a version of the client that runs.
Sure.
I am a huge fan of parallel card game. That's why I'm here. If the card game goes away, I go away. No mistake there. That's the reason I'm here. That's the best decision you ever made. Thank you for finally making a digital card game that is like all the way there and not just like kind of good if you squint at it. That I am the biggest fan of the card game. That hasn't changed. It's just because like it's just the idea that most card games, one of the strengths is that you can run them on potatoes, and it's kind of like, but it's a half joke. Like, it's a half joke that maybe Parallel should just go all in and make it super insane at that point.
Right.
But you know.
Yeah, no, the good news is that they're synced up. They're syncing the builds between mobile and desktop now. So like every usability benefit's going to be across platform. But yeah, I think like ultimately it just keeps coming back to the same thing. It's like make a great game, make IP that people really care about, create a world that people can enjoy, be it cinematically or, you know, in other variants of games. I don't think that objective has changed, like that many ways to play mission. And like, if you can't stand in front of a mission that's meaningful, like, and say, because I think that encompasses interoperability, that encompasses an IP that is pushing across multiple games. Like, someone has to try to do this correctly.
Yeah.
And like that to me, many ways to play encompasses the general sentiment and idea. And so, like that mission hasn't changed, that objective hasn't changed. It's just we're in the process of building 2 more games and an AI tool. And like, I don't think it's any less true, because it's been true since the very beginning, is like, if a successful brand created, you know, a drop that was really popular and everyone in the world loved, or an NFT product or whatever that everyone loved, it would go and create more ways to use that so that more people could be interested in it. So I think there's really 2 pieces. One is like marketing it, right? And the other one is like just making games because not everyone plays card games. Not everyone's going to want to play simulation games. Not everyone's going to want to play third-person shooters. Just creating more ways for people to interact with it so that, you know, your preferences are met and you can still feel connected to the world and IP. And you can like back into the card game or back into Colony or back into whatever else.
Here's my number one question I think I want to ask like the whole interview now that we've gotten here. So far, Parallel has clearly got some of the best art, world class, for any game in the world. These cards, the art, if you deny it, you're just blind. I don't know what to say. Like, it's obvious. How, or like, can you confidently tell me that Parallel's UI and UX will become some of the best in the world? Or is that just not an option? Because to me, it feels like the same way 4 or 5 years ago that art was so important, a similar level of if the UI UX was that level, that would be the number one thing for the game. I know steps are being taken with the Go Fast patch and stuff in the weeds, but I kind of want to ask at a high level, like, realistically, do you think that Parallel can have a world-class UX UI the way that you have with the art? And do you think anything else would need to change, or is the current team structure enough to get us there?
Yeah, I think 100%. Like, and I think that's actually what you're going to see the team focus on. So yes, like that is the focal effort of the engineering work and design work and usability work. Is specifically going to be around that. Yeah. Outside of deception, which is in test, I think you had access to the test, right?
Super fun.
Yeah. Outside of that, that is where all the calories are going.
And is that kind of now that mobile, Veen has mentioned how a ton of resources have been going into mobile for a long time, and now that starts to get freed up. So is that shifting towards UX UI?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. Like I don't think like, I think the quality of everything we do, we used to say like we have to defend the bar. Like the bar of quality has to be upheld, and like we won't compromise, right? And so, maybe in the shorter term, we want to get it to market. We want people to try it and tell us, oh, it sucks at this, or like, you need to fix that, or I want to be able to queue actions, or I don't like this, or I don't like that, whatever it is. We take note of all of it. And then we just continue to put effort into developing and making sure we get to where we want to be. But like, we're not going to compromise the goal. It just might take us longer than you wanted us to take us.
Because that's what I see when I talk on the ground floor to lots of the players of this card game and other games. Like, I have more hours in Web3 card games than probably anyone, because I don't play any of the Web2 ones. I'm just all like, and it's like, or I not as much recently. And number one, like the number one thing people want is that. I just feel like if the messaging around the TCG, and especially from you, this is just an unsolicited opinion to take and consider, is like, if your messaging was very like, we are going to have world-class UI, UX, we understand this has been the most lacking factor. The art's amazing. The card design is amazing. You guys can see that. The UX, UI, there's some evidence, but there's like a lot more to be done. This is the hill we're dying on with the TCG. I think that's what most people on the player side want to hear. And world-class casual experience kind of translates to world-class UX, UI, because the rest of the stuff is basically more content, more game modes, more cards, more stuff. But like, so that's kind of like that's just like the final.
There's no point. There's not a lot of point in continuing to invest in like more game modes if you can't get the basics right. And so like the quality of the bar has to be upheld. And like, I think I often say to the team that like, we want to make sure we do the art justice. And like what that looks like and what changes need to happen to the client to be able to get to that place is something that they're entirely focused on. So, and I think we've made some strides like as of recent, but I think we have a long way to go still, for sure.
Also, I just want to say, Zentro, your question is stupid and I'm not going to ask it. Keep on hating, bitch. All right. With that said, Quinto, you have any final thoughts or anything? That's all I got. Mic drop.
Yeah. No, nothing else here for not any more questions. Just want to say thank you, Kalos, for being here today with us. I think we asked the questions needed to be asked, and I hope that you appreciate it and it satisfy your urge to address the community. So yeah, if you have any other comments to finalize this interview, please go ahead.
No, I think it's good. I think you guys asked questions that I guess the community had asked, or other people I've heard mention. Sometimes I don't answer everything directly. I think it's just like a waste of time. So maybe we do this again. But generally, I think there's a lot of work to do. We're in a good spot to achieve our goals still, and we just want to keep pushing forward and make the games and the IP as special as it can be. And thank you to everyone who supports us to see that happen. And hopefully, we get to a place where we can look back at this and complain about different problems that are even more interesting next time. And I think that's our goal, is like hear out the things that we think we could do better at and adjust and make sure we, and the good news is none of this is surprising. I think most of it is like, hey, stuff you knew about, how are you addressing it? And it's really just a matter of communicating back via this channel. But I think generally, the message I leave people with is we're in a great spot to achieve our goals. I'm very appreciative of everyone who supported us and made this possible. And look, watch for Deception, which is coming up, and a bunch of other stuff that we're doing. And thank you to anyone who plays our games and enjoys our IP. And we love the world we're creating. We love the games we're creating, and I hope you guys do too.
Thank you so much for your time, Kalos. It's really been an honor to talk to you. I have so much respect for what you're doing. Thank you for making all this time. It's been great.
Okay, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Well, we wrap it up here. Wait for the VOD that's going to be posted soon after this interview. And thanks, everyone, for watching. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.